Going into Ariadne, Zerbanetta's aria was the only thing I remembered really well from the lockdown streams. Coming out of it, I know exactly why I don't remember a damn thing after it. Ariadne auf Naxos is an opera composed by Richard Strauss with libretto by Hugo von Hofmannsthal. The opera is set up in two distinct parts. The first, a look behind the scenes as an unnamed composer deals with the frivolities of his patron. The second, a serious story of Ariadne, occasionally interrupted by a comedy troupe. It's one of those tales that's sort of a story within a story you occasionally see. I suppose a modern example of that would be The Artist. The movie is about a silent film actor creating movies as talkies start taking over the industry, and with that you get looks at different films in production, including one where the actor finally talks on screen. I suppose Tropic Thunder could also be used as an example, since the making of the film turned out to be the film itself within the film where they were discussing and trying to make the film. But then again, which parts are the main film and which became Tropic Blunder? There's still pretty clear delineation as to which is the act and what is backstage in Ariadne, whereas the line is a bit blurred in the modern comedy. Anyways, let's get the opera, but there are a couple pieces of business that we need to cover. First, I know I said Fire Shut Up in My Bones would be the next thing up. That's still coming, but it's being rewritten. The reason for that is there was a lot I wanted to say about the opera, as well as performers of color at the Met in general, so I decided to split it into two separate videos. Be sure to subscribe if you want to see both when they release. Second, real-life events have precipitated changes to both schedule and casting. For instance, Anna Netrebko has been removed from future performances due to personal beliefs, including an upcoming performance of Turandot coming in May. Meanwhile, the Met itself held a special benefit concert to help those affected by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Audio of the concert will be available to listen to until Monday, and you can go to metopera.org to find various ways to help, including making donations, hosting refugees, or simply signal boosting verified news. And of course, there's the long list of verified organizations you can donate to on the site ukrainewar.card.co. The list has grown to include almost 24 organizations covering a wide variety of aspects, such as medical supplies and personnel, veterans, children, at-risk groups, and journalists working in the country. Check them out at ukrainewar.card.co. That's ukrainewar.card with two R's.co. Okay, let's do this. Ariadne auf Naxos begins with the composer played in a trouser role by a mezzo-soprano typically, and their mentor balancing their art against the will of their patron, who has hired both an opera troupe and a burlesque troupe to perform that night. After some infighting amongst the two, the major domo announces that both will perform at the same time, since the dinner ran long. The composer initially refuses to comply, but is convinced to continue by both his mentor and Zerbanetta, the leader of the other troupe. Portions would be cut down to allow for the thespians to attempt to cheer up Ariadne, the lead in the opera. With that, the opera begins. Ariadne is washed upon a shore, left behind by her former lover Theseus, and longing for death. Eventually she is... guys, I'm explaining the main story here. I'll get to you guys in a sec. Eventually, Ariadne is visited by Bacchus, who has been fleeing Circe. After some miscommunications, the two sail off into the sunset, having fallen in love. As for the other troupe, they pop in here and there trying to cheer up Ariadne, which falls spectacularly flat. Meanwhile, Zerbanetta is stuck trying to choose between four suitors, eventually going with the baritone Harlequin. In case you're wondering if there's any real-life situation Strauss was pulling from, well, here's a quick history lesson. There's actually two versions of Ariadne auf Naxos. The first actually included a play, not a prologue, followed by a 90-minute opera. The play itself was based on another play called Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, or The Middle-Class Aristocrat. And the play itself was several hours long, which made the entire performance around 6 hours in total. And it flopped hard, for a number of reasons, including the choice of venue, originally the Residence Theater, which was ill-suited for an orchestra. Eventually, Hofmannsthal had the idea of rewriting the opening portion, creating what is now the prologue. The changes would require fewer performers needed, as well as try to connect the two acts, explaining why there's a comedy troupe in the middle of a retelling of a Greek myth. Strauss, as the composer was in the opera, was initially reluctant, but eventually relented. While the first has been performed in full since then, including at the 2012 Salzburg Festival, it's this second version that has been the most widespread of the two. Getting back to the performance, I enjoyed most of it. Lisa Davidsen as Ariadne was wonderful. You could feel the drama of the situation coming from her, as well as her annoyance from all the changes made. Lisa is still fairly young, but her chops are amazing. Her repertoire is fairly vast, but I could see her being a great Wagnerian, as well as an excellent Strauss soprano, something she could share with the likes of Waltraud Meyer, Deborah Voigt, and Nina Stemme. Brenda Jovanovich was limited, but that was due to the role. In the opening, he's only given a couple of lines to voice his displeasure, and in the opera, he only shows up in the final 30 minutes, but he did admirably in the role. I haven't seen too much of Brandon, but from what I've read, his roles include Don Jose in Carmen, Mario Cavaradossi in Tosca, and Lohengrin, which is pretty solid. I would definitely like to see him in something Wagner related. Maybe get him and Lisa together in Tristan and Isolde, maybe. Then there's the composer, performed by Isabel Leonard, and she was good. Yes, there is subtext to that. I've seen most of her live and HD performances, if not all, and while I did enjoy them, really I did, most of my opinions on them seem to boil down to one general thought. It's good, but not as good as blank. For instance, she was good as Rosina in Barbara of Seville, but not as good as Joyce DiDonato or Kathleen Battle. Heck, with her doing Carmen in LA, I almost expect her to perform it at the Met, and then I can say, it's good, but not as good as Elena Garancha. Now that thought generally runs into problems with newer operas like The Tempest and Marnie, since she's almost the only one, and was even part of a Grammy-winning performance for the former, but let's be fair, and at least leave on one good note. Isabel Leonard is the best Blanche de la Force I have ever seen. So far. And now we come to Brenda Rae, performing the role of Zerbinetta, and I feel like I didn't do her justice by saying she was fine in my quick reaction to the performance. She did well. I did like her take on Zerbinetta's aria in the second half, but then comes the issue. Two of them, in fact. And it has nothing to do with her. This opera has been performed nearly 100 times at the Met since the 1960s, meaning that performances of Ariadne auf Naxos happen on a regular basis at the house, though not as often as, say, Tosca or La Boheme. There are bound to be excellent performances to be had with that many tries, and sure enough, the Met has two of them on video. Kathleen Battle is perhaps the best singer of the trio. I always love coming back to her rendition of the aria, and watching it over again, I don't know which I love more. Her singing, her telling the audience to hold their applause, or the guy next to her at the end leading the cheers. And then there's Nathalie Dessay. I swear, every time she gets on stage, she gives a masterclass in acting. And this is just another one to add to the pile of great performances. It's even included in this amazing Nathalie Dessay box set that I have right here. Yeah, my issue wasn't Brenda. It was comparisons that her performance will have to go up against. As for the opera itself, I remember watching this online before, but I almost always have a hard time remembering most of it, for a couple of reasons. First, there's the issue that we have two completely different, though connected stories being told. The first part is entirely backstage, and we never go back to this part, although it makes sense as the second half ends on a high note. But even then, we have my second issue. We get Zerbinetta's aria, everything's flowing, things are moving, and then the last 30 or so minutes can be a slog. I believe I fell asleep during the lockdown streams, and in the HD simulcast, I recall looking at my watch and grabbing my phone while it dragged to its conclusion. I suppose you could argue there's something to the audience being part of the art, filling in as surrogates for the bored nobles, but this is something I've found in most Strauss operas I've heard. For as much as I like De Rosenkavalier, it limps to the finish line, gassed and out of breath. Elektra isn't long at all, but there are points where it overstays its welcome, and then Capriccio can go live in a dumpster for all I care. And it's a shame because the last few minutes of Ariadne auf Naxos has some beautiful melodies. Although when I try to recall them, they kinda get jumbled up and mixed in with the end of Act 2 of Il Trovatore. Overall, this is a good performance of an alright opera. If you're up for it, I'd recommend it, whether you see it in theaters, on PBS, or on the Met's website. But what did you think of the performance? Did you have a different opinion on the last part of Ariadne? Leave a comment below and we'll discuss. Be sure to subscribe for more when it comes out, and hit the thumbs up button if you like the video. I'll see you next time. Take care. I was choked on that one.